Greetings and welcome to Agents of Change. I'm Dr. John and I'm the fitness psychologist. I've taken the show on the road this week and I'm coming at you from Salt Lake City, Utah. I've got the best show ever today. But first, if you're new to the show and you find something that resonates with you and adds value, please go to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, and leave us a 5-star review, and that'll allow us to keep the content coming your way. So, today I have a special guest who graciously took time out to meet with me while I happen to be in town here in Salt Lake City for a conference. He's a loving father of 5, an elite mile distance runner who's attempting to break the world record in the 50 and over age bracket, a successful attorney, and the creator of Elements Meals. It is my pleasure to introduce Stan Graham. Stan, welcome and thank you.
You're welcome, John. It's good to be with you this morning.
Stan, you've got a beautiful city here. Definitely a stark contrast from where I flew in from Tampa this morning. Is this where you grew up originally?
No, I was wondering as I was driving to the office this morning what you thought of actually being able to see horizons that were beyond like maybe a 60-degree arc.
I know, right?
Actually see 180 degrees or at least maybe 150. But yeah, it's pretty wide open space compared to the green places you come from.
Absolutely. It's absolutely gorgeous, though. I mean, love the mountains here and love the topography and just this whole area of Big Sky Country. It's I vacationed here with my kids in this area a year ago in July, and just absolutely spectacular and definitely nice to see, like I said, some topography after coming from Florida, which is very, very flat.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, I've visited Florida a little bit, and it is flat. That's accentuated when you come from a place where you have a little elevation.
Sure.
So.
And then it's a shock for us, when it comes to cycling and triathlon and those kinds of things. When we come from Florida, and we're used to it being flat and the wind being your only enemy, and then you come here to try to ride hills in places like St. George, and it's absolutely taxing on your legs, but it's definitely good for building up your power. That's for sure.
Yeah, the elevation change. Training at 4,500 feet or 6,000 feet is different than training at sea level.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Yes, definitely.
And elevation plays a fun game in there.
Oh, I
so you got to test your VO2 max.
I definitely learned that. First time I was in Boulder, I learned all about that. You're riding around there, it can definitely test your endurance, and if you're not used to training and that kind of thing, I mean, that's why the endurance sports capital of the world out there, because everybody goes there to train and get used to that thin air.
You bet.
So. Gosh, well, you've clearly had success in every endeavor that you've taken on, whether it be as a father, attorney, distance runner, and now this new endeavor with Elements, which is absolutely revolutionary. And I want to have you elaborate on Elements very soon. But first of all, I want to talk about, when someone's had the kind of success that you've had, I'd like to find out about how they got there and what were the influences. So talk about the influences, whether it be family, faith, what are the influences in your early life that contributed so much to your success?
Well, they asked me if I grew up here earlier, and the answer is no. I grew up in southwestern Idaho.
Okay.
Outside of Boise,
Gotcha.
Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
Kind of in the farmland west of the city. And my father was a son of a Idaho potato farmer.
Oh, wow.
My dad grew up in eastern Idaho, where all those wonderful, famous Idaho potatoes come from.
Sure.
So literally, my paternal grandfather was a big Idaho potato farmer. My dad grew up on that farm. He's old enough now. He's 83 now, 84, and he can remember, riding wagons and other farm equipment drawn by horses. I mean, it's that kind of interesting compression of time between generations. We have so much technology now, but I have a father who held on to horse reins as the technology for field plowing.
Okay.
And so I mention that because he learned from that, as any farmer would, that what he would teach us as boys. I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. I'm second of 9. At any rate, we would learn. He would talk about laws of the harvest, because there are laws that control soil productivity and soil health. There are laws that govern plant health, plant growth, whether it's irrigation or fertilization or when you plant or when you don't plant, when you harvest, when you don't harvest, all those kinds of things. They're very unforgiving.
Right.
I mean, if you don't have your potatoes in the ground by May 15th, then you're not going to have a harvest because it's going to freeze.
So there's no almost. You need to know these
Right.
laws and know them well and abide by them.
Right.
There's no flexibility. There's no
Right.
wavering. Your livelihood really depends on that.
Yeah, and a lot of us understand some of these. For instance, if you want to grow potatoes, then you plant potatoes.
Yeah.
You don't plant peas
Exactly.
to get potatoes. And so there's a lot of wisdom that comes from the agricultural, small farm space that a lot of people don't get these days because they don't grow up in the dirt.
So talk to me, if you would, about how that harvest wisdom. How did you take a lot of those lessons, and how did you apply them to the endeavors that you embarked on in your life and your pursuits?
Well, so my dad came off that farm and he got into the financial services industry, but he bought a patch of ground because he knew that if just by being raised that way himself, he knew that on a small little farm that if you raised boys on that patch of dirt, raised kids on that dirt, then the likelihood of trouble was significantly less than what would it be otherwise. If you're digging post holes and repairing fence and moving irrigation pipe and taking care of a large yard, half an acre and a half of grass, big old garden, you've got to weed that, and you're taking care of animals, and, butchering animals, all that stuff that you think twice about doing something stupid because you understand the consequences of a stupid decision.
Right.
Because they can be immediate or a little longer term. It's like, well, you can make a really dumb decision today, and you're going to pay for that in 4 months.
Right.
Unquestionably. And there's, if there's not a recourse or redress for that bad decision, then that's a tough road to hoe because the consequence is coming.
Sure.
Right. So, and some of the best advice my dad gave me, not that I've always heeded it, but he would always say, just don't do anything stupid. And that was great advice. And one of his other sayings was, get the water to the end of the road. As an expression, a metaphorical expression of finish the job.
Gotcha.
If you don't get the water to the end of the row,
and
the crops at the end of the row die.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing to do is really make sure that the water gets to the very end.
And that's the thing. And finishing the job is something that so many people fail to do, whether it's in their athletic training. You especially see it in business, in the entrepreneurship space, where people, another well-known speaker I heard recently talked about, people who start new businesses and they don't take the water at the end of the road. They don't stick around long enough. They don't finish the job. Some folks give up and they quit and they don't stick around long enough to collect.
Yeah.
To collect on all the time they invested. They don't finish the job, and it's really a matter of sticking around and finishing the deal, because oftentimes you don't even know how close you are to breaking through.
Right.
When it comes to whatever it is your goal is, whether it's athletic and business, whatever else is you're trying to pursue, what you're trying to achieve. And so, really finishing the job and seeing things all the way through I think that's something and having that level of patience and that resilience and sticking to things is something that, it's very difficult for a lot of people, because a lot of people will give up and, they don't follow it all the way through to the end.
Yeah, and part of that is, as far as the laws of harvest go, what you learn is that there are seasons. So there are seasons to plant. There are seasons to cultivate soil prepared for planting, and there are seasons to plant, and seasons to nurture, seasons to harvest, and then there are seasons where you don't do any work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've done the harvest, and the harvest is in, or you've sold it, and you're done. Winters are typically those periods where the farmer doesn't work.
Gotcha.
Because the work's been done. But so the perspective is interesting, because in the winter it's a period of not necessarily rest, but it's a different kind of work that needs to be done, right? Like you're planning for spring, because it just so happens that after every winter you can expect a spring.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes in our lives we have winters where, for some reasons, no reasons, whatever, we experience winters where our ability to work and produce is really inhibited.
Sure.
And which is a trial. It
Right.
can be a real trial if you haven't planned on that.
Well, it's like with a lot of athletes with off season.
Yeah.
With triathletes, it's like, how are you going to spend your off season? Okay, there's no more races now. From November on until maybe February, March, or whatnot.
Right.
How are you going to plan for the next year? How are you going to prepare yourself? Maybe you're not spending all that time if you're a triathlete cycling or running.
Right.
But what are you going to do to make yourself stronger? You're going to do more strength and conditioning.
Right.
What changes are you going to make in the off season? So that you can set yourself up for success in that year and be able to endure that next year. Same thing on a farm. You gotta have a plan in place so that you're going to be able to endure throughout that year.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's the parts that you have to be more cerebral.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the parts. It sounds like some of the seasons are more getting out and doing, but then it sounds like the wintertime maybe it's not as much physically taxing labor, but it's being cerebral and having your plan and charting your course for how you're going to complete the cycle over and over.
Yeah, it reminds me. I was thinking of there's a book. Title is The One Thing, and the author of the book identifies Mike Phelps as an example of powerful habits. Because sometimes in terms of finishing a project or staying on task or getting the water to the end of the rope isn't a function of, a lot of people think, well, it's discipline and willpower. But willpower is not always on call. There are days when you and I we have specific athletic goals to achieve or business goals to achieve. And sometimes we can be motivated to do that. And sometimes, honestly, I am not motivated.
There's times we don't want to go out. We
do
that workout. We don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, exactly. You say, well, okay, come on, willpower, get me through this hard thing. And so you muscle through it, and it's not there to do.
Right.
And so the perspective from this book, The One Thing, is really to identifying the one thing that you can do that creates the most impact that day, that creates subsequent impacts tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that.
Mm-hmm.
And pay attention to the one thing.
Breaking it down to a smaller goal.
Smaller goals, and time efficiency, and creating habits. Because once habits are created, then they're behaviorally they're very efficient. So you don't have to work at them.
So find one thing to focus on and focus on doing that really well.
Right, and strive for automaticity in that thing. So he talks about Michael Phelps and says, look, the most accomplished Olympic athlete. If he was a country, he'd be number 7 in Olympic history in terms of medals won.
Mm-hmm.
He's a human, and he'd be the 7th ranked country in Olympic history in terms of medals won. And so part of his analysis, or part of his practice, Phelps' practice from the time he was 14 through the Beijing Olympics, he trained 7 days a week. And instead of 6 or 5 or whatever, but trained 7 days a week, because he said, if I train 7 days a week, then I'm going to pick up 52 days of training that someone who trains 6 days a week keeps. And so
all those subtle ways that seem subtle now, but then when you look at it that way, that's a great way to pile up an edge.
Yeah, 52 days of training, and what kind of training that involved. We don't need to talk about the specifics of that, but he had made a commitment. One of his habits was 6 hours in the pool every day.
Just one of his warm-ups, I know, was like a major, for most people training for an Ironman, what they would do for their workout for their swim, that's his warm-up.
Yeah, that's an acquired skill over how many years,
right,
and how many thousands and thousands of hours.
Sure.
Right. But for me, the use of that analysis was the value of a daily decision. Because over the course of a year, he could pick up 52 additional days of training. That focused days of training, whether it was rehab training, rest training, but whatever it was, but those were days that he was engaged in gaining an edge on his unidentified opponents, because when they were sleeping, he was training.
Right.
And he just that proved out.
You know, that one of those days by themselves, that extra day week might not seem like a lot at that time, but it adds up. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, you know, the analogy that, you know, a lot of folks use now, and I talk about with my clients is the baseball analogy with hitting singles.
Yeah.
You know, and try to hit singles every day. You don't have to swing for the fences. Try to hit the grand slam with the uppercut swing, because chances are, more often than not, if you're going for the grand slam, the uppercut swing, you're probably going to strike out more than. But in baseball, the guys that are in the Hall of Fame that have 3,000 hits are the ones that go out consistently day in and day out and hit those singles. Yeah. And if he's finding 52 more days in the year to hit those singles, that's going to pile up. You know, that becomes 52 hits.
Yeah.
That's 52 hits. That's 1/4 of a very good season for a baseball player.
Yeah. So application to your question of how do you accomplish things, it's you pick up the bat and swing. I mean, first of all, you pick up the bat.
Right.
You're willing to go to the plate and say, throw the ball.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people just won't pick up the bat.
Right. And when they
metaphorically. So if you don't do that, then you know the result is you're not going to get a hit. You don't pick up the bat, no hit.
Right.
So I think from a daily practice thing, it is it's not uncommon for people to, in terms of experiencing a physical training trough or a business practice trough, or business development or sales work, whatever that trough happens to be in whatever area of your life, or a parent trough. I'm having difficult relationships with my kids right now, that kind of thing. That we'll understand that that's a trough, which is part of a wave, and that in order for there to be troughs, there have to be crests.
Right.
So put it in perspective.
Right.
Don't let the trough keep you from parrying today.
Right.
Parent today.
Yep.
Love today.
It's those difficult times where we don't feel like it's stuff. That's where the growth happens.
Right. That's where the growth is. But so that's where habitual power lies instead of perhaps willpower. It's habitual power that these are the behaviors I'm going to develop as a parent that I'll execute every day, regardless of anything else that happens. For instance, and for me, one of the things I did as a parent was I read to my kids. From the time that they were 3 to the time that they were 12, even older, I read to my kids every day, every evening. And so, as a result of that, I mean, if you talk to my kids and ask them, what's the one thing your dad did that, if anything, right, that made any kind of contribution to where you are today and what you're doing today, a few of my kids would say, well, yeah, we read together.
They're always going to remember that.
Yeah. So,
especially with that kind of consistency, when you're reading them every single night, and you're taking that time. I mean, talking about kids, I mean, there's nothing better that you can give than time. I mean, when I've worked with families before, they talk about the kids and entertaining their kids and reinforcement and whatnot, but we are the most positively reinforcing thing for our kids. You are the best toy that you have as your kid. Yeah. You can do things for your child that no toy, no video game, nothing can do. And so when you're providing that constant positive reinforcement, I mean, that's something they're always going to remember, because time is something that you can't get back. Yep. And that's something that you can always give, and it's the best gift that you can always give.
So I think in terms of experiencing success is a function of how many failures you can experience, and then pivot, learn and pivot.
Exactly.
So I've certainly had times in my life where it seemed that failures lasted for years.
Can you give me an example of any of those?
In the attempts to pivot were, distance from those failures gives some additional perspective, but there was a time, in the last 7-8 years, I went through I actually started running as a function of going through a really dark period of my life, which was a result of physical failure and economic failure and marital failure and just everything.
And so running became something that...
It was self-administered medication.
Sure.
And so
I can identify with that.
So I didn't run track in high school. I didn't run track in college. I skied. And I played basketball in high school until the coach said, as a junior, these are contemporaneous seasons, and you didn't make a decision whether you're going to ski or play basketball. And I said, I'll ski. But my challenge was that I was going through some marital issues that led to potential divorce, and trying to work through those for years. Then at a certain point in time, I had multiple shoulder surgeries and was looking at losing the loss of actually about 80% of the use of my arm.
Oh my gosh.
Just because of shoulder repair, rotator cuff repair, surgery failures, and really being in physical trauma that way from injury, and then repeated surgeries and repeated recoveries for over a year, and which played absolute havoc with my legal practice, because you have no business advising anybody on anything when you're on pain meds.
Oh my gosh.
That kind of stuff.
Sure.
I was a sole practitioner. And so a lot of things combined, and it was a marriage of 28 years. It was a very, 5 kids. It was just an extremely challenging time. And running became one thing that I could do. Because, I was training 6 days a week. I've trained 6 days a week basically since I've been a sophomore in high school.
Okay. So the running all started as a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, in the sophomore in high school, the day I had a gym class, and we started the semester with a test, and it was how many chin-ups, push-ups, and dips, just 3 movements. How many can you do in a minute? For each, a minute of push-ups, a minute of chin-ups, a minute of dips. And
a minute to win it.
and my performance was terrible. And so I just had made a commitment at the beginning of that semester, that's not going to happen again, because it happened in front of everybody.
Oh, gosh.
The whole class, geez. So
this is in public. This was kind of a public embarrassment.
There you go. It's it's a competition, open competition, but it was just, hey, we're going to start the class. Let's measure where you are.
Okay.
So then you can decide what you want to do about it. And at the end of the semester, you can see where you've been and where you've gone, what you've accomplished.
Why do I have a feeling that was a low moment that very much fueled you?
Oh yeah, it was. That was one moment I said, okay, that's never going to happen again. I'm not going to be embarrassed like that again. Or I'm not going to finish low like that. I'm not going to not perform like that. So at the end of that semester, then, rather than being in the bottom half of the class, I was in the top 5% of the class in terms of performance of those movements in that minute time period. So yeah, that just set a course, right? It's just like getting the water to the end of the road. Just every day, you work on it, you work on it, you work on it. So it wasn't like, I think one of the challenges we have as athletes is understanding that the only thing that really matters is today. What do you do today?
Mm-hmm.
What you do today? What you do today takes care of tomorrow. Right? It's just, what are you going to do today?
Sure.
Instead of being overwhelmed by, I'm in this condition now, and I've fallen off the wagon, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Just train today.
Right.
Train today.
I think that's a great point, because, the most successful athletes are ones that are able to do a couple things. First of all, they have a short memory, because, the things that happened in the past, if you get bogged down with what's in the past, there's 2 conditions as a mental health practitioner I see. People who are depressed are bogged down with what's happening in the past.
Yes.
People who have anxiety are bogged down with the future, and they're too focused on that and what might happen, or about things that haven't even happened yet. It may not even happen, and you can go into a downward spiral if A happens, then B happens, and C happens. But if you keep your focus on today and what your goals are today, and focus on winning that day, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, John, because I've spent plenty of time in both those spaces, both in depression and anxiety. Spent plenty of time with that, which really pushed me to start running, which really my journey in running really started out just as walking, because in that.
Are we talking 7 or 8 years back?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I'm trying to repair from these, it was about 6 years ago actually, but trying to recover from these shoulder injuries and surgeries. The only thing that I really could do safely in order to not further damage myself and inhibit repair, that kind of thing, was walk. And, strap my arms to my body and walk. And so as that progressed day to day, it wasn't just how far I could walk, but a period of time. I'd measure time, and then be able to pick up a pace to a jog, and then I just kept track of my time.
So walking became jogging, became running,
Right.
became...
Yeah, and I was able to increase my time, and at a certain point in time when I was getting close, I got to a 6-minute mile, because I didn't run track, so I'm not a runner.
Now you said sophomore in high school, you had been training a lot.
Yeah, that's just gym, but I played basketball
Oh,
in high
okay.
school, and then
So you weren't a track star in high school?
No, not at all.
Okay, so there's not this long.
Didn't run, no, there's no history.
Long-standing track background or
No.
collegiate background.
No.
Wow.
No.
So this is something that started out as this is the only means of physical exercise I can get right now due to my injuries.
What can I do?
And I'm going through a lot of things emotionally in my personal life, and I need an outlet. Of course, exercise we all need it to, to manage our stress as an outlet. So this isn't this is a good outlet for me, and this is one of the only things that I can do. And walking becomes jogging becomes 4.5 minute miles.
Yeah. So
How did you discover that
well,
speed?
I had no idea what speed was. I approached running from a very uneducated place. It just, was to go out and start doing it, really start walking. But the purpose of it was physical, but it was physical to handle mentally. Because I knew that connection in myself.
Sure.
If I wasn't doing, my physicality affected my psychology. And I was absolutely aware of that. I absolutely knew that. And so,
from an endorphin standpoint, from a confidence standpoint,
look in the mirror standpoint.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was just really it's a weakness for. I look at that. I've looked at that over the number of years and say, well, that's a weakness. Man, you should be better off if you look in the mirror and accept yourself for whoever you are. But as you are right now, but I'm just never satisfied with that. We talked a little bit before we started.
I don't think I'm satisfied with that either. I don't think we need to necessarily be looking in the mirror and saying I'm satisfied in saying okay, where I am is enough. I mean I think you need to have you need to be comfortably unsatisfied.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't love yourself.
You don't
appreciate
right,
yourself, but you can expect more from yourself.
We can always better our best.
Yeah.
We can always get better. We can always improve. And that's what makes our country great. That's what makes people great. And like we were talking about beforehand, if we're not always trying to do something to improve, if we don't have something that we're striving for, that can sometimes set us up for getting depressed.
Yeah, for sure. If you're not planting, what are you going to harvest?
Too often people have their finish line, and and like we were talking about before, we can't have that finish line because we have that finish line, we're going to get stale, and we stop improving, we stop growing, we stop doing the things that got us to the point where we are here. And if we're staying still, in reality we're getting worse because the rest of the world is getting better around us. So it's important that we continue to have those challenges that we put in place.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the unique challenges of taking on. You're in the process of trying to break the world record for the mile in the 50 and over age bracket.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the unique challenges in training. I've seen a lot of people, in their 50s doing Ironmans. You see a lot of people out doing jogging. But that level of speed for this kind of speed event, what kind of unique challenges do you see training for this as someone in your 50s?
Yeah.
what are some unique challenges there?
One of the I think one of the benefits that I have is I don't have one of the benefits. One of the reasons I was able to enter into a conversation with myself about that kind of mile was actually some ignorance, quite a bit of ignorance about what it would take. And I think that's so. I was getting close. I was better than a 6-minute mile. At that point, I remember finishing up some running, walking back home in the evening, thinking, I wonder if I could run a 4-minute mile. And thinking about Bannister's mile. And I'm a little taller than usual. I'm 6'5", and right now I'm about 219. And my race weight's really around about 207,
Okay.
maybe 205, something like that. And I've been doing a lot of resistance training, a lot of weight strength training and flexibility, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But I just asked myself, I wonder if I could do that. And I had read about him, I watched film about him, and mentally, my thought was, that mile it's a finite distance with a finite number of steps at a specific stride rate, and he did that. So why can't I do that?
Sure. And Roger Bannister, was he a doctor of some kind as well?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah, he was going through this schooling, right?
Okay.
Plus, he had a lousy track. They were running on cinders.
Okay.
And they had no they had no shoe technology.
So he's doing all this while having another career.
Yeah, his life's going on. He's not, necessarily privileged. The guy's got a lot of time commitments, a lot of brain commitments, and family commitments, and all the kind of stress that we all go through. But he was
very comparable to the commitments that you have.
Yeah,
you're raising 5 children, and you're
common kind of commitments. But he had set out on this. Was remarkable. He had this vision of being able to break this barrier. It wasn't just a world record. It was a barrier. This where everybody in the know of that day said you can't do it. It's impossible. It's physically impossible.
Right. And there's all the naysayers, and that's the biggest.
It has never been done before, so it can't be done. It's like a conversation now of running, a sub 2-hour marathon. That's not possible. That's and now it's like
until it is until somebody shows
so
you.
Like, holy cow, wow. So it opens up. So my perspective on it was, well, he did it. Why can't I do it? I've kept myself in reasonably good shape all my life. I've treated my body well. I've eaten well all my life. I'm one of the weirdos that it cared from a young age and actually maintained a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
To do that without I didn't need anybody to. So anyway, that was the initial thought is, I wonder if I can do that. And so it was a month or so later, coming home from some training, that I thought, I wonder if there's a world record for like 15 older guys. I'm 57 now, And I went home and found out, there was. And it was like 4:28.9. Like, well, great, I'll pass that on the way. That comes before 4 minutes, so great. I'll do that.
I'll just catch that.
I'll just do that on the way past. On the way to 4. And so,
just a stepping stone along.
there is a lot. There is something to say about making a commitment before you know everything it's going to take to do it. Even with the company I started a few years ago, as Elman's company, I had no idea what it would take. I knew what I wanted to create, but if I had known everything that it would require of me to actually do it, I don't know if I would have started.
Sure.
And so I think there's a brilliance in ignorance.
Right.
Because
mental limiters.
Yeah. So, but it's not necessarily anyway. It was there was enough ignorance about the issue of running a 4-minute mile that I actually believe I could do it. Right. And that makes a big difference. I mean, you asked
if you don't have those mental limiters, I mean, the greatest limiters that we have in our lives are self-imposed. Most of them are.
It's really
and so if that's removed from the puzzle,
it's really wild. We mentioned a couple of names before we started recording. James Lawrence and David Goggins. I think guys that have been there are many others, but people that really challenge. Really challenge the idea of mental limitations and demonstrate that it's.
And we're really able to rise and gain. Sorry to interrupt you. But to get fueled by all the people saying that they couldn't do. I mean, to do in James Lawrence's case, the Iron Cowboy, 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days. I mean, there's all these people saying that you can't do it, and
just that it's not only physically impossible, logistically you can't.
Sure. And on top of that, there's people out there that they don't. There's always going to be the haters and naysayers that are trolling you on Facebook or whatever, that they don't want to see people succeed, because they're jealous and they don't want to see that happen. And with David Goggins, I mean, he had plenty of people telling them he couldn't do anything along the way. And then he goes and breaks the world record for pull-ups in a day, doing over 4,000 pull-ups.
Look at Sam Meadows. And look at the price he paid people. So, it's really it's fascinating. The more my training has progressed, because at a certain point, I got 2 years ago, I got a professional coach, because I had reached really a limit physically, because of my form was terrible. I didn't know how bad it was. I wasn't a runner. So my running efficiency was terrible. And I was like, pounding a square peg in a round hole.
That's probably one of the other age-related things that happens too, because with running, the more time that we spend running, the more bad habits we pick up along the way. If you ever look at when children run, how wonderful their form is, they don't have any bad habits yet.
Yeah, they're not wearing shoes. If you want to learn how to run, take your freaking shoes off and find a pasture.
That's why I've seen some of the videos of you running without the shoes.
Absolutely. You bet. I run barefoot.
Well, that's a great way to perfect your form, because if your form isn't perfect, you're going to hurt yourself pretty badly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would wonder how many people, what percentage of people, if you say, let's go to the park, take your shoes off, and let's run, if they'll actually do a heel strike. They won't do it because it's not natural.
Right.
They won't do it. Put them on a little bit of an incline. That barefoot, run uphill. How does that feel? What's the position of your body? That kind of thing. How is your foot striking the ground? That's how you need to hit the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the mechanics.
You might cure plantar fasciitis for the whole rest of the world if you do that.
You don't. The running shoe industry has created more problems, more joint problems, and knee surgeries and everything else.
I believe it.
It's terrible. It's terrible stuff. But anyway, so I got my coach, the running efficiency thing. I back out, John, a little bit on a broader topic. One of the things, when I started the Elements Company, one of the things, part of the spirit of that effort that came with it was my desire a really deep desire to give a shout out to men, because I'm a man. Yeah, but it's really a shout out to everybody. And particularly at the time with men, it was because I had friends, a lot of relationships that were 40 and older, thinking that their physical fitness warranty had expired, and now they were on the downslope of physical activity, because now I'm prone to injury, and I'm this, and I'm that, and I just, part of my desire was just to shout out to these guys to get the hell off the couch.
Yes.
Get off, get the hell off the mental couch and
Right.
the physical couch,
Right.
and stop resigning yourself to mediocrity.
Stop making excuses.
Physically, yeah. Whatever you're telling yourself, it's a lie.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's not just an excuse; it's a freaking lie. So stop telling yourself lies. Stop believing them, because the body's a fascinating thing. If you will facilitate it,
Yeah.
then it can do, and your mind. Just
All comes
fascinating things, and if you will
Yes.
facilitate
Yes.
them,
Yes.
if you facilitate them, then you can accomplish remarkable things. That's one of the things that has fueled my pursuit of this breaking the world record, because I'm not a runner. I mean, I run now, but I don't have this history of running track, and
But who's to say what a runner is?
being in college and running track, and
Maybe not in the traditional sense, but
right. And so it's true. And so part of my reality is that I'm at an elite level now that I started this in earnest really 5-6 years ago, and it's a daily commitment, and I'm not special. I'm a common guy.
but you're showing what can be done, and in that shout out, I mean, it's have you ever heard the analogy, you want to be the lighthouse and not the tugboat?
Sure, that's yeah.
This is total example of being the lighthouse.
Um,
Giving a shout out to men and showing them what is possible. Okay, just because you're 57, you're at risk for heart disease or for this condition and that condition.
Yeah, turn that shit on its head.
Or exactly, just
all
because
all of that is a function of habit.
Right.
All of that. Chronic disease is the outcome of a habit.
Right.
So change the habits
Sure.
and change the outcome. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens fast.
Right.
I mean, in the course of 5 years,
Yeah.
3 years, 2 years. I mean, it's amazing what we can do.
Right. It all comes back to tackling those core beliefs that people have about themselves, about the world, about the future, with regards to that, because it's not events that make people feel depressed or anxious and as a behavior give up. It's how you think about, it's those thoughts that you're having. What are you telling yourself? What are the lies, like you said, that we're telling ourselves? And that's the part, as a psychologist, that's the part that I always get people to wrestle with. And the people that are successful athletes, they're the ones that are able to cope with depression and anxiety well, and cope with any of those negative emotions, because they're able to reel in those thoughts and not let them get away, not let them become these limiters.
Yeah. Yeah,
pop
so
up.
as an example of this, so I checked out one of your Instagram posts this last week, and you're out running, you're running basically doing repeats.
Oh,
I don't
yes.
know, at 5 in the morning or something, and I can relate with that. I mean, running, you were running 30-second repeats.
20-second repeats on the minute.
Okay, 20 seconds on the minute.
Yeah.
And so for me, my training would be analogous to that is running 200-meter repeats on 30 seconds.
Okay.
And looking to hit, between 32 and 28 to 32 seconds for each of those 200 meters, which is really a really quick anabolic speed rate, right? And but when you talk about battling, kind of, especially these days, people are stressed out of their minds and anxiety and depression on the rise. And I'll tell you, if I'm having a bad day mentally, or there's some kind of challenge that I'm experiencing mentally that day, I just suit up and go to the track, and in 40 seconds, that is gone. Because my body's, I'm more focused on, I need to breathe. And I'm feeling fatigue. Here comes the lactic acid in. Now, okay, my oxygenation, is decreasing because that just happens. And I've got to speed up.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of what the concern was that day when I got to the track, under a minute on the track, you're not worried about it anymore. In fact, you can't even remember it.
That's good therapy.
It is, because now all you're concerned about is, I got to breathe. I've got to pull in more air, more oxygen, and I can feel the fatigue in my legs. And I've got to overcome that mentally and pick it up.
I got to get this next repeat.
Maintain the speed. Stay in the flow. Do your body checks. In terms of your stride rate and your foot strike. If you're relaxed in your shoulders, in your hands, all these different things, because speed comes from form.
Sure.
So if you maintain form, that's the relative security.
Yeah. Focus on all those things to do.
Yeah, and it's it. I mean, you do focus on those so you know what form feels like when you do run, so that when you actually get out there, you can run without. I mean, you have the option of thinking about your form and checking things, but then also there are sometimes you say, screw it, just run.
Right.
Run for the hell, run for fun.
Right.
Have fun. Just run. And so when those things combine and you experience what runners call flow.
Csikszentmihalyi.
Oh, that's just like, oh man.
Great book.
Yeah. That's just an exceptional experience when that happens.
Speaking of flow, as a psychologist, I have to ask this question. In sports psychology, one of the key elements to success is having a pre-game, pre-race, pre-match routine that gets you focused, gets level of energy arousal so that you can really compete and just hone in and perform at the highest level. What is your pre-race routine and ritual that gets you just that perfect flowing in that zone?
What helps me get to that zone is before every training session, I watch 3 videos.
And what are those 3 videos?
They're videos of Steve Prefontaine.
Okay. Tell us a little more about
Steve Prefontaine. There's a video of Prefontaine that is set to U2's Where the Streets Have No Name.
Oh, great song.
So it's him running. He's on the track, just different races he's running, seeing him. And then there's another video, with again him running and speaking, set to some music by Muse, and that talks about whether this is crazy or love. What is this that we're doing? And,
gotcha.
And it's a love. It's a love. And
right.
So even just yesterday, I was doing some kinesthetic training where my coaches asking me to walk, in 5-minute increments, walk for 5 minutes, focusing on which foot is heavy, which foot feels heavy. This is done on a treadmill. And then 5 minutes walking, lightening the heavy feel of that foot. And then the last 5 minutes walking with making no sound, walking noiselessly. And then do that again, running. So I doing that for 15 minutes, and the next 15 minutes in those segregated 5 minutes.
So running without making noise.
Right.
It's a good way to make sure you don't stick to the ground.
Yeah. And
more time in contact with the ground, that's more drag. That's
understand how that happens.
It's slow.
What are the mechanics that are going to make that possible? Because if you're overstriding, that's not going to happen. If you're overstriding, you're gonna hear it.
Oh, sure.
And you're gonna feel it all the way up your leg. It's like
yep.
putting on the brakes,
that heel.
jamming up. So you want that foot to come. You want your foot strike to engage right below your hip.
Right.
In a toe heel, just touch that heel just enough to engage the glutes, which powers your leg up. So you're not focused on pulling your legs up. It's powered up because you engage your glute at the bottom of that stride by contact the heel to the ground. And bam, it throws your leg up.
Got that perfect flexion at the ankle, at the knee, at the hip.
Right. And so, but doing that and so then doing that at different speeds. So doing that at maybe a 7 minute mile pace, and then at maybe a 5.5 minute mile pace, but focusing on which foot feels heavy for the first 5 minutes, lightening that feel the next 5 minutes, and then the third that third 5 minutes is be noiseless, run as quietly as possible.
Wow.
And so that really focuses you on, it's like moving proprioception work, where you're hyper-conscious of the contact of your foot
Yes.
with the surface. And running barefoot really helps with that, because there's no barrier between your foot and the surface, so you can feel.
Incorporating all that sensory input with the motor input to put out that perfect stride.
And then you begin to feel efficiency.
Yes.
Oh, this is okay. Now I'm efficient. Because efficiency requires effort.
Of course.
Right? But the output of efficiency is greater than the input of efficiency. So that's where the efficiency comes in. So, but it's Prefontaine. Steve is my hero, man. The guy was. So I watched these 3 videos. I'll share them with you, because he was a. I can watch those videos and I get it's such. They're so inspiring to me. There are days when I get emotional about it, and where I can feel the love of the sport. I can feel the love of the activity.
Yep.
And I just had this conversation last night with a friend with Joe, as I finished up my work, my training that day. Said, I was in this third set of this 15-minute, 3 by 15-minute routine.
Gotcha.
That at this is about a 5.5 minute pace,
Okay.
5.5 minute mile pace. So I'm doing 10, 11 miles an hour, and it's a pretty good clip.
Yeah, that's cruising.
And feeling the pain come on, and smiling, seeing that pain, visualizing that pain coming at me, and smiling to receive it, being joyful to receive it, because I realize now I've done what's necessary to experience this pain, which is hard.
Right.
To get to this level of pain is difficult. I've accomplished that. That's wonderful. Accept it. Here it comes.
You're almost smiling as
now,
though that pain is a reward.
Yeah, it is. That's the reward.
That's very Goggins-esque,
Yeah, it's a reward. It's a beautiful feeling. It's a really beautiful feeling to understand that this isn't going to kill me. That there is no danger here.
Right.
Whatever my mind is telling me, whatever my body's telling me about, oh, you've got to stop this because it hurts. And that's to find joy and happiness in experiencing that.
Right.
Is really liberating, because you understand that I've done what's necessary in order to get here. That's a lot of work. So getting to that point where you say, I'm beginning to hit my limit, that's a fascinating place to be. So a place of wonderful gratitude, because it takes so much work to find where your limits are.
Sure.
Mentally, physically, searching for the outer bounds of your limits. You've got to find those areas before you can ever get beyond them.
Right.
Before you can discover what does it feel like to get beyond that. And that is fascinating for me. It's that, what's beyond this? Can I go another 5 seconds? Can I go another 5 seconds? Can I go another few seconds? It's where you feel this
is powerful.
Well,
this is powerful nuggets, folks. I hope you're listening closely. This is powerful.
There's a point in my training where there's some exercises I can do, and then in my training where I go blue liquid.
Blue liquid.
Blue liquid.
Tell us more about that.
Well, because my hearing fades, my sight really decreases at the margins. So everything
almost like a tunnel vision.
Yeah, tunnel, and then ambient sounds recede. So everything becomes silent. And what I can hear is my breathing and my heartbeat. And I can feel my feet on the track. And the effort seems to diminish because everything else recedes. And I say blue liquid because I experience this feeling of floating and that there is no friction. That inside of me, I'm nothing but blue liquid. And it's this flow. No friction, no resistance.
Everything in perfect synchrony.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And what I've discovered, because I've done this, there's some, like I say, some training movements that I can do that bring this on. You can approach. For me, I approach this feeling when I'm touching the edges of passing out. That's the amount of physical mental exertion is. You're getting to that point. But before you get there, and maintaining an ability to stay there because you want to, instead of saying, well, I'm going to give over, and the body's just saying, okay, we're going to give over, but choosing to stay there, I've never abused any substances, but I've got to think that whatever feelings.
Well, what you're describing there,
this is one of
that's got to be better than any other substance there.
It's absolutely a magical feeling because I feel like, I do feel like I'm levitating. I feel like I'm absolutely floating.
Yeah.
And my mind believes it, and it's a wonderful experience. So.
How often have you gotten in that zone? How often does that happen when you get into that blue liquid stage?
Yeah, it's not. It's more frequent now because it's a habit. It's a skill set.
Yes, it's just like meditation. The more we meditate and do relaxation exercises or imagery, the more we practice those mental skills, like any other skill, like riding a bike or whatever else. The more we do it, the more automatic it starts to become. We get into that mode faster and deeper.
Yeah.
And so the more those things become habit and automatic for you, that's more of the blue liquid stage that you get to benefit from and enjoy. Yeah. And in athletic pursuits, there's nothing better than that feeling.
Yeah, you begin to understand what it takes to get there, which is. It's a red zone, right? It's just a really painful. You've got to go through this painful place because your limits you're always pushing your limits out. So there's always work to get to them before you can get past them. But that's just an awesome place that's such a great place to explore that fuzzy boundary.
Right. And so many people are so close to getting to the other side of it, and that they don't realize it. And I think there's few people like yourself that actually keep pushing to get to that other side. A lot of people, they get to that, supposed limit, or that ceiling.
Yeah, most of us will knock off way before we even get to that.
Right, they stop short.
Yeah, because they think that.
They don't stick around long enough to collect the payout, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, the payout's expensive because you have to deal with the pain.
Big investment up front.
Yeah, you've got to be willing to pay that price every time.
Right.
Every time, and so the reason that Prefontaine, the reason that Pre inspires me is because he was a front runner. And he just ran from the front. Yeah, he didn't run strategically. His strategy was to run his opponents to death because he believed
take over from the start, and
he believed categorically that he could endure more pain than anybody. I mean, he believed that completely. He could endure more pain than anybody.
So he would just run from the front for the whole race.
He would run from the front, and he says, if anybody's going to beat me, then they will pay. They'll pay for it. They're going to bleed because I can bleed. I can suffer more pain than anybody. So if they want to beat me, bring it.
They're not stronger than me.
He believed that he could outlast them just because he could tolerate more pain than anybody could.
And when you're taking off and you're leading from the front right off the bat, that's in doing it. That's got to demoralize the competition.
Well, it can be at the same time. As a triathlete, if you're breaking the wind and everybody's drafting off of you, and that's a fact. So he's running at the highest drag point, and everybody's drafting off of him.
Everybody else is back in a little peloton kind of thing.
Right. But he says, and he told his coach, who asked him, look, don't you want to win? You need to run more strategically. If you ran from the back, then you could draft off from everybody for a while. And you could win. And Steve said, well, of course I want to win, but I don't want to win like that. Winning like that is chicken shit.
Yeah.
That's what he called it. And he says, I'm not going to win like that. I'm going to win by, committing everything I've got to that race.
Because I'm the toughest and I'm the strongest.
So I'm going to him, running was an art. Every race was a work of art. He says, I'm going to run it. I'm going to run my race. And I'm going to run from the front. Because if I can't win by giving absolutely everything I have for the entire race, I don't care. I don't want to win that way by, some kind of strategy. No, I want to give all my effort from the start to the finish. That's how I'm going to win. And so it's a very courageous way to win.
Sure.
Because you're at a disadvantage.
Right.
But it was just a challenge from the get-go.
Right.
And you talk, you listen to all the guys that ran with him. He was the standard. He was it. And so to toe the line with him was an extremely intimidating deal because you knew he's going to go out. He's going to go out fast.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to hang with him, that was his challenge. Hang with me, man.
I dare you.
Hang with me, yeah. Because he says, hang with me because I got to kick too. I can kick. The last.
Oh
there's some races of his that are just chilling. They just put a shiver up your spine. I love them. So that's part of my pre-training routine is to watch those three because there are points in those videos where you get to see the look in his eye and you know that he's not, and he's in his place.
Yep.
He's somewhere else.
One of those guys that walks in the room and owns the room, and you know what you're up against there.
So try to experience his spirit and what he brought to the track. He was always, I don't think he knew pretty much what he was going to experience, but he was always like all professional. These highly athletes,